This is Food for Thought with Deborah Walker. Today on Food for Thought, I'm taking a bit of a diversion into goddess territory with radio show host Karen Tate. She's the host of Voices of the Sacred Feminine, voted by bloggers as one of the most influential, dedicated goddess advocates of the present day. She's an author of the book Sacred Places of Goddess, 108 Destinations, and Goddess Calling, which I recently read and I was truly inspired by. So welcome, Karen, to Food for Thought.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on the show today.
You're very welcome. Now, Karen, just give my audience in the UK a little bit of background about yourself, your show, and your journey with your writing and your own studies, because it is fascinating what you've been writing about.
Well, I guess I should start out by saying, really no one is more surprised than I am, because, I grew up in the southern portion of the United States, which is very conservative, very Christian, and I didn't know anything about this growing up, so it hasn't been a lifetime endeavor. It has been something that has consumed my life, however, for the last 25 years or so, when I understood the importance of it. I left Louisiana, where I grew up, and moved to California, and that's when goddess spirituality found me. And at first it was learning about a feminine face of God, because, you didn't hear about that in the Bible Belt. It was all about the Abrahamic religions, and to be quite frank, I'm sure probably a lot of people are like myself, they only run into people who are Christian, moving to California, it was like a melting pot, and the world opened up to me in so many different ways. And, goddess spirituality was one. I also started traveling around the world and with the focus of visiting sacred sites. And that resulted in my first book, Sacred Places of Goddess, 108 Destinations. And then I wrote a second book, Walking an Ancient Path, which details how someone from a personal or a community perspective could incorporate the sacred feminine or goddess spirituality in their life. And the third one, which just came out in March, Goddess Calling, Inspirational Messages and Meditations of Sacred Feminine Liberation Theology. Well, that one is sort of the culmination, I guess you could say, of the wisdom of the last 25 years. I've started to really understand and feel it's important to share the ideals and values of the sacred feminine that's missing in our world, that could really help us make the world a better place, quite frankly. And that's, what has, pushed me into social justice activism, doing my radio show, Voices of the Sacred Feminine, every week, doing conferences and workshops and, ministering at the pulpit, so to speak, with this message, because, I think most of us would probably agree what's out there doesn't work for most of us.
Yeah. Now, your book, for me, and you can tell me that I'm wrong, but it felt like a manifesto of feminism for the 21st century, except rather than the unshackling of chains for equality, it's almost a return to the feminine for our society. Would I be right?
Well, partially. I'd say it's a reimagining, a reinvesting in the sacred feminine. It's incorporating it back into society alongside the masculine. It isn't about, turning the world into a place of patriarchy and a skirt. That's what some people misunderstand to begin with. They think, oh, it's just a bunch of angry women who want to take over the world and subjugate men. No, no, not at all. In fact, I've been married to a wonderful guy for 30 years. And lots of men get this, and, they realize that patriarchy has has really damaged men as well. And this is about a partnership. This is about a partnership between the masculine ideals that are sort of running amok today. It is about tempering them with the feminine. It is about a partnership between the masculine and feminine ideals. And that can, this can all be looked at from different angles. You can look at it as deity. You can look at it as archetype. You can look at it as ideal. And, and if you're not a spiritual sort, if you're not into religion, because after all, we see the damage religion has done on the planet. We can look at it from the standpoint of, what ideals the sacred feminine brings to the table that would help balance things out and make the world a better place for more of us.
What exactly does sacred feminine mean?
Well, it means different things to different people, and and I sort of started that, I guess, a moment ago. When I go out and teach about the sacred feminine, I teach about it from those three perspectives. It can be deity in the heavens, if you are someone who believes in that, because I know a lot of people don't, but a lot of people still do. If you believe in a deity in the heavens, there is a feminine face of God. All you have to do is look at across the continents and see all the many different cultures and all the many different faces she has. But if you live in the West, that's sort of been swept beneath the rug. You have to search a little bit harder. She's also an archetype or role model. It goes beyond the role model that patriarchy gives us. Patriarchy gives us Mary, but Mary is hardly a whole woman. Mary's a safe archetype or role model for women. She's not going to make waves. She's sort of benign. She's there in service to man, the male god and men, or humanity. Then the sacred feminine is also ideals and values, that, as I said, are missing. It would be negotiation, partnership, collaboration, nurturing, caring, sharing, wholeness, balance, peace. Instead of this culture that we live in today that seems to be obsessed with consumerism, war, domination, oppression, exploitation, the survival of the fittest mentality. We weren't put on this earth to live the way we're living, I don't believe. And I think returning the sacred feminine values to the world gives everyone a better quality of life.
I found your book absolutely fascinating, to be honest, to read, and really wide-ranging, far more wide-ranging than I expected in regards to bringing in politics and the nurturing side. It was, in fact, it felt very balanced itself, which was lovely.
Well, thank you. As I said, the book is really a culmination of years of living this. And, in observing, what's wrong out there in society. It's years of research, because a lot of people don't understand that we once had a feminine face of God. Especially if you're in Europe, you have access to the most wonderful museums that so many Americans never step foot in. I think 15% of Americans actually have passports. And it really shows in their in their lack of awareness of history of other cultures. But you go in the British Museum, the Louvre, the museums in Italy, the Anatolian Museum in Turkey, the museum in Crete, outside Knossos. And, you see these ancient cultures that revere the feminine face of God, and in fact, I like to consider these museums her sacred sites because it's undeniable that she was there, while, people who grow up with, these Abrahamic faiths, they never even discover her, which is sad, because they're missing a whole hunk of history. But, the feminine face of God dates back 30 to 40,000 years, long before we ever had a male God. And if we could just get this as, I think, as part of our curriculums in school, I think it would make a big difference. Like when the Da Vinci Code came out, I remember people were just all abuzz because for some of them it was the first time they had heard about a goddess. And I know what that's like, having the background that I have. And, and so for me, it sort of put me on a mission. I figured if I wasn't going to learn about this till my late 20s, I knew there were countless other people who hadn't heard about this either, and consequently didn't know the importance of it and how it can be used to make the world a better place.
And it is interesting because you explain how, the ancient mythology of the sacred feminine has been obscured and demonized, particularly in the West, through a variety of means. What's your perspective on why that would have happened?
Well, it's about power and control. Really, quite frankly, I believe, you look at the Bible, and the Bible gives license to men to dominate the earth and everything on it. So everything becomes in service to man, and man is in service to God. And let's face it, if man determines God says something, then it's really hard to go against that, isn't it? Because you're going against authority. You see, what happens is if you grow up with a mythology that only has a male god, like so many in the West, then you end up with male leadership. And when you end up with male leadership, then you have this imbalance between the genders. You have what we see across the globe, with multinational corporations, dominating the environment, dominating indigenous cultures. It's all about domination when you think about it. It starts with women and men. Then you see it in our communities. Young boys are taught to deny their, what may be, some of their natural, innate qualities to maybe nurture and be compassionate and caring, because they have to survive on the, in the schoolyard, because, you have this bully mentality out there, sort of, they learn survival of the fittest really young, and, and that continues, we have statistics that show, the military, for instance, and our college campuses are some of the most dangerous places for women because of the abuse that goes on there, the assaults that happen. We live in a culture where, or you see sports figures get away with it all the time. How many times do we see a sports figure in the news for domestic violence? And we have so many of these things that happen to women as a result of being less than, of being not equal to, of not being seen, the female gender not being seen as equal to the male gender. It can be female genital mutilation, domestic violence, human trafficking, infanticide. It could be not getting paid equal pay for equal work. Here in the United States, we have Republicans running amok across the country, turning back the clock, trying to thwart women's access to birth control, and trying to deny them their constitutional right to an abortion. Some are even talking about legitimate rape. Is rape legitimate? Some are so ignorant they've actually been caught on tape saying things like, well, if it's really rape and the woman didn't want it, her body's got a natural way of making sure she doesn't get pregnant. The insanity of some of these men that they think they are entitled to control women and their reproductive lives. And you might say, well, why is that important? Well, if a woman can't control her reproductive life, she can't control if she can go to school and get an education. She can't control the economics of her family. She can't control her career. Men don't have to think about this, but women do, because women are the primary caretakers. Women are the ones that have to carry that baby 9 months and take care of that baby for the next 18 years. So it's a big subject, and Jimmy Carter, our former president, has a wonderful book out right now. I think it's called it's titled "A Call to Action" or "A Call to Freedom." I forget, but he talks about how discrimination against women across the globe is one of the biggest sins that nobody talks about. It's just accepted as normal. And you know what? We have to change that. And when women discover a feminine face of God, they start to become empowered. They start to ask questions. They're a little bit less likely to be that doormat and continue to be exploited.
Do you think most women actually realise, in many respects, that the society is so patriarchal, and actually we are being treated like that? Because it's a bit like if you're in the goldfish bowl the whole time, if you can't see from the outside what's happening, then fundamentally, do most women realise, do you think? You're absolutely right, and that's very astute, because some women don't even get it. And I know about that because I didn't get it the first 25 years of my life. I was into goddess spirituality a couple years before I started to get this aspect of it. And women become complicit in their own oppression, or they buy into the dominator model of patriarchy. You had Margaret Thatcher over in Europe. We have people over here like Sarah Palin, Michelle Bachmann. They might be some of the names that are more recognizable. They are benefiting from the way it is, and they continue to perpetuate that. We call that patriarchy in a skirt. They don't understand, even in some cases, that any of this history we've been talking about, in a lot of cases these are Christian women, they deny all of this herstory that we've been talking about. Some of them think the world is only 6,000 years old, so try to convince them that these artifacts in the museum that are 30,000 years old are legitimate. You know what I'm saying? You have so much working against us, and a big problem is the misogyny of patriarchal religions, because women have been conditioned and indoctrinated to be the helper, the supporter, not the leader. I interviewed a lovely woman once who was, just a pillar in her church. And she said to me one day, her and her women friends just love when they can get their minister to take time to come to coffee with them, because they can tell him all of their wonderful ideas, and if he thinks they're good, maybe they'll get a chance to institute these ideas in their community. And I thought to myself, why does she need his permission? Why does she have to, why is his authority the one that they're going to? Why don't they take on that mantle of leadership? So as many women are, actually doing, as you have women now who are saying, no to the misogyny and sexism of the church, and they're starting organizations like women priests, and, they're being ordained, and they're moving forward and becoming religious leaders in spite of what the Vatican may say, or if they're part of, one of these evangelical groups, that don't let, women take leadership roles. So, it is a struggle. It is a struggle, because if women really all got on the same page and opened their mind to this, we are the majority on the planet, and maybe we could change things. Instead of us doing 80% of the work and only getting 20% of the assets, we could maybe find some, we could find some balance. We could find some equality. We could find some justice. Now, something that I see quite a lot is women becoming more masculine. in leadership roles. So rather than bringing the feminine into the roles, they actually just become more male, and therefore they're almost more dominating than the men.
Well, you do see that, but I think there's two parts to that. We don't have a lot of role models. Let's face it. We are entering into a patriarchal world, trying to play the boys' game, and sometimes in order to do that, you have to play the way they play. I mean, I think that's what some women have managed to do. But you do hear talk now about how that is shifting, and even some corporations, of course they're not in the majority, but some corporations are starting to realize that they benefit from the way women tend to do things, their problem-solving skills, their, the innate differences between, men and women, how we approach that. But there's another, part to this as well. Look what just happened here in the United States. The woman, one of the top newspapers over here, she had managed to make her way all the way up to editor. And, it's that same old thing. If a woman is tough, she's a bitch. If a man is tough, well, he's just being a man. And we admire that, And so women still suffer from that, It's difficult for them, I think, in corporate America still, where there's less than 20% leadership of women in corporate America in the United States anyway. They still suffer that double-edged sword that if they do make it into, management, they have to work doubly hard. They're scrutinized twice as much because, what men do is just normal. But if a woman is tough, then she's marginalized or she's criticized for it. I think you probably know what I mean.
Well, the language becomes very different around the two genders, doesn't it? In regards to, as you say, that you're either a bitch or you're just a clear leader, a strong leader. And so it does split, and you can see that.
Yeah, it's very difficult for women. I mean, there's a lot of re-education, I think, that has to happen. But you figure we've had this patriarchal system for thousands of years, and it's only been in the last couple hundred years, or less than 100 years. I mean, let's face it, that women are really in the workforce. I mean, here in the United States, women, only got the vote, less than 100 years ago. Women in Turkey were voting before women in the United States were voting. And you still have men so backward here in the United States, that you still have Republicans, conservatives will come on television and you'll actually catch them in video saying that women still shouldn't have the right to vote, that it should still all be about, control and power should be in the hands of white men, Christian white men, So it's tough, there's a lot we have to overcome, or just wait for some of these old guys to die off and leave it to the millennials, who seem to be a little bit smarter about some of these things.
At times we think we've come such a long way as women, and since they debated whether, as you say in the book, women had souls, and we suffered abuse for wanting the vote, and we're even institutionalised. But we still have a long way to go, don't we? What's the future look like, do you think?
I am optimistic in spite of all of this, because so many people, I think, are starting to open their eyes. When I started teaching this, 10, 15 years ago, there weren't nearly so many people on board with this. You hear feminine and sacred feminine so much more now from out of the mouths of men and women. And even if they aren't calling it by that label, they are talking about those ideals. They are talking about win-win situations. They're talking about partnership. They're talking about justice and equality. I think things like the Arab Spring, I think things like our Occupy movement, here in the United States, they're fighting for minimum wage of $10.10. You see the big news the Republican war on women has made. You see more and more people talking about the plight of women. Jimmy Carter, I just mentioned, our State Department, when Hillary Clinton was, Secretary of State, and Condoleezza Rice, they were doing things to uplift women in third world countries because they know that if women have a way to support themselves, it benefits the whole family, it benefits the whole community, or even like micro loans and things. If you lend women money, families get educated, girls go to school. Look at that young woman who is speaking out, after being terrorized by the Taliban, and the role model she's become, to educate young girls in Afghanistan. There's a lot happening, I think, right now, everywhere for women. We still have a lot of work to do, but I think there are a lot of people out there on a mission to uplift women. I think it's the moral, it's the moral issue of our time. So at one time it was, to try to uplift minorities, African Americans, black people in the United States. Then, gay liberation, that's taken off all over. Even I think the religious right has sort of given up on that point, and their last stand is keeping women down, keeping women second-class citizens. But, I think there are enough women out there that are getting this, and men who are our allies, that will eventually turn the tide. And I think our society will be different. We're entering the age of Aquarius. We're leaving that age of Pisces. So many astrologers I talk to talk about, yes, there's going to be a lot of upheaval. Yes, there's going to be a lot of change. There's going to be a lot of discomfort, but that's what's necessary for change to happen. And I think all of the upheaval we have in the world are signs of it.
Now, your research of the sacred sites and the artifacts actually showed different types of societies where women were more prominent, don't they?
Oh, yeah. I say Goddess is like the poster girl for diversity because, there's hardly a country you go in and you don't find a feminine face of God, I'll just spout off a few. You can go to Japan and you have Amaterasu, the sun goddess. In fact, the sun is on their flag. It's like she's there hidden in plain sight. You also have other goddesses there, like Cannon, for instance, one of the Buddhist goddesses. You have Kuan Yin in China. You have the rice goddesses in Asia that people still make offerings to because, she feeds them. You go to Egypt. Plethora of Egyptian goddesses there. Greece. Italy. In the Norse goddesses. They're all over. In Ireland, think of Ireland just for a moment. You have Bridget, who is doubly a saint and a goddess, and they're progressive Christians there that believe they're one and the same. They don't have a problem with that at all. You go down into South America, Latin America. You have Guadalupe. You have Polynesian goddesses. You have in the West, women are starting to look at Mary Magdalene as a goddess. And they're sort of rehabilitating Mary. Some people say Mary, the mother of Jesus, was maybe the first social justice activist because maybe Jesus learned his social justice activism at her knee. So women, I think, and men alike are giving themselves permission to reinterpret, to reconstruct, to reimagine, and not just swallow the stories of patriarchy. Why should they? These stories were created by men for their purposes, for their agendas. We need a new mythology, and it's on the rise, I believe.
I hope so. Now, you explain in your book about the many ancient sites that are actually shaped as women. Can you talk a little bit more about this? Because this is something that I don't even know about.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, you can look at that two different ways. I think maybe what you're referring to are the temples in Malta.
Yeah.
The mother-daughter temples there, where you actually can see these standing stones that are in the shape of sort of the outline of a woman's body, with the upper part of the body with the rounded breasts, and then the lower part of the body, which is the rounded hips. And right next to the temple will be a smaller version of that. So it's come to be thought of as like the mother-daughter temples. But then you also have the natural landscapes. Like, for instance, mountains are often thought of as the back of the goddess. Rivers and streams are her sacred blood. Caves are her womb. There are lots of different, sacred sites like that, because goddess is nature, after all. So, there are goddesses that have affinities, particularly in certain ecosystems, like maybe you will, like the Yoruban goddesses, for instance, they're associated with the sea and rivers, and Bridget, for instance, she's a goddess of the healing waters. And that's why you find so many healing wells, in Ireland, and people actually partake of the water and believe that if, they bless themselves and can heal themselves with it. Not unlike places like Lourdes, for instance, because let's think about those apparitions. Women and men, children, have seen apparitions of Our Lady. Well, Our Lady never has a name, does she? We either call her Our Lady, or some people have got, maybe come to calling her Mary because of their, Christian background. But what if that is, what if that is the sacred feminine? Just imagine. I think that really just blows me away.
Absolutely fascinating. Do you think there's been a conscious decision to sweep away the goddess or female side of our history? I have to say yes and no, because scholars have lots of theories about how goddess disappeared. Some of them they believe might have been related to climate. There's a good book out there. Some people give some credence to the alphabet and the goddess, that when writing entered the equation and people became more left brain, the more experiential, intuitive side was sort of marginalized and seen as less important. But there's also, patriarchy does rise. And as patriarchy rises, you see a concerted effort to thwart the feminine leadership. I mean, Christianity, for instance, the early days of Christianity looked nothing like we see today. Scholars who have really studied it know that Christianity was the liberation theology of its time. Slaves were drawn to it because they could find freedom. Women were drawn to it because, they could have a place as leader. We had so many women who were starting Christianity in their living rooms, so many churches that were actually built because of female benefactors. But things changed over time. Mary Magdalene gets marginalized and becomes a prostitute. Mary's role is diminished. I think it was a concerted effort, as well as, other outside influences. I mean, Maria Gimbutas has a wonderful theories that more and more scholars are starting to look at again and embrace, that the Kurgan hordes, the Indo-Europeans, obliterated the more peaceful, goddess-oriented cultures who were not warlike, who didn't have horses, didn't have weapons.
So when they enter the picture with their war gods, in some places over time, goddess starts to disappear. So it's not one answer, and there are lots of answers, and it happened. She disappeared over time, and for different reasons in different places.
Yeah, it's truly, truly fascinating to understand this. And do you feel that it was a threat? The feminine is a threat?
I think sometimes the feminine is a threat. First of all, look, let's be candid. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. What if there were female-dominated cultures that were less than egalitarian? Maybe men didn't want to be second-class citizens. Maybe they did rise up. I do think women have a particular power in their sexuality. Why do you think women in some countries have to wear burqas today? Why do you think, some of the Abraham religions are so negative on sex? They've taken, Christianity takes the sacredness out of the material world. And when you take sacredness out of the material world, then suddenly women's bodies as life giver, they're no longer sacred. The earth as mother, as Gaia, she's no longer sacred. The species on the planet are no longer sacred. Everything's ripe for the picking. And it seems like it seems almost convenient to me that when you take the sacredness out of all of this, then it's all there to be exploited. It's all there to be in service to who's ever in control. So I don't know. That doesn't seem like a coincidence to me.
And it's interesting that you're talking about exploited, and actually you go over part of that in the book about how our bodies and our sexuality, and if we were following the sacred feminine, then fundamentally we would own that ourselves and hold the power over our own bodies. But actually, we've lost that in many respects. And the power of sexuality has definitely changed in our society. It's very, very different in this patriarchal society, isn't it?
Well, it is, and and women have lost touch with their own bodies. Look, you have the pharmaceutical companies now who tell women, oh, you don't need that nuisance of your monthly menses. Here, we'll give you a pill, and you can just get rid of it for 3 and 4 months at a time. Now, mind you, we don't even really know what the long-term ramifications of that might be. But, look, even our mothers, I know my mother grew up calling it being sick. Yeah. Some of us grow up calling it the curse. You have women who, in some cultures, they're still relegated to the menstrual hut rather than seeing that time as, connecting you to the mysteries of Goddess, connecting you to, as life giver. What could be more important than that, than life giver? We live in cultures. Remember, it wasn't that long ago that a pregnant woman couldn't be out in the workforce. She had to sort of hide herself indoors. I remember when Demi Moore was on the cover of, I forget whether it was Time magazine or one of the big magazines over here, and she actually posed nude while she was very pregnant, and the uproar that caused, because for decades, as recently as the 50s, to be pregnant was, it was a little bit taboo, because you had to have had sex to create that baby, and sex still had that sort of seedy, side to it, instead of it being something beautiful and pleasurable, and the gift, the gift that it is. You still have religions that say, that women are unclean when they're on their period, and men can't touch you, when you're on your period, or, I mean, I could just go on and on. It's really insane, the taboos that still live out there, even today in our modern culture, about pregnant women and menses and sex. I mean, the shame is still attached to sex unless it's for procreation.
Indeed, and I come back to my point originally. I just do not think a lot of women realise the power that is held over them in regards to these things that actually are just accepted as norms and accepted that we will live to them.
My hair lights on fire, metaphorically speaking, of course, when I see Republican women in the United States who just carry water for the religious right, and they don't even realize that they are, their own jailers. They don't even get it. They're told that this is what God says, and they don't think beyond that. There's no critical thinking. If women really got together and said enough of this craziness, these guys would be run out of town on a rail. But, they are brainwashed. They are still indoctrinated to believe this man-made dogma that benefits who? Men, Because, look, let's face it. We still have women totally dependent on men. And that means however they treat them. Women are economically, in some cases, totally dependent on men. That's why you see so many women, oftentimes victims of domestic violence, who can't leave because they have kids and no way to support themselves. Those sorts of men don't want women to be able to go out there in the world and support themselves and have freedom, because that meant, they'd either not have a wife at home cooking and cleaning and picking up the dirty laundry, or they would have to maybe become a better version of themselves, don't you think?
Oh, the other side of that, I was just going to say, is where women then end up in poverty in their elderly years, their senior years, because of the fact that they've had children and are unable to claim the state pensions. That's what we have in the UK. We have high poverty with elderly women.
Well, we have a lot of women that slip through the safety net here as well, and, Republicans are doing their best to erode it even more. Now, you would probably know more about this than I do, but I know we have a scholar here in the United States by the name of Ann Eisler, who has been trying to talk about, I think, what they do in the Scandinavian countries. My understanding is that if have to stay home and take care of family, whether it be children or aging parents or something, women do end up retiring with some sort of social security or something. Is that in fact true?
I think it's accurate, yes.
Yeah, and you see, we don't have that here in the United States. If you were one of these women who stayed home and the husband paid the bills and you didn't work outside and didn't have Social Security, if he dies and leaves you no money, or, he leaves you for a younger wife, we hear all the time about that happening to, women in their 50s and 60s. They can't even balance the checkbook, and the husband is off with the new trophy wife on his arm, while the woman, devoted her entire life to raising the family, and now she has nothing. It still happens. It's not something that just, an anomaly that happens occasionally.
I think also, you talked about the trophy wife, the wife that's been discarded, and I do think there is a very big discarding of women as they get into their later years in a number of ways, but also the sexualization of women, and so you're nubile to a certain point, and then after that we don't really want to know. And you see that in films all of the time, that women are, they get past their age of when they're useful.
I'm glad you touched on that, because that's another difference in sacred feminine theology. it used to be that we looked at the three phases of a woman's life. She's a maiden, that nubile sexual one you described. Then she's a mother, where she gives and gives and gives and gives until her body can't, pop out babies anymore. And then there's the crone. That's the old wise woman. Well, women have started to insert a fourth one in there. She is the queen. She is the woman that comes after the mother and before the wise crone. And note, I said wise crone, not some old woman that's just going to be discarded. The queen is the woman, maybe she's menopausal, her kids have left. She's in her full power now. She has maybe ran households, she's maybe started companies, maybe she's authored books, all of the things that a woman does that keeps society together. Let's face it. And so now she's in her full power. And I think that's the real time that patriarchy fears women, because they're fine with the sex kitten. They love the mother who takes care of them until she's got not an ounce left to give. They have no use for the old woman. And the queen, I think that's the woman that they really fear, because that's the that's the woman that has the time and has the wisdom and still has the energy to go out and change the world. And I think that that's what we are encouraging women to find in themselves. And also we don't just toss out the old woman either. We revere her as an elder and a wise woman. She is a go-to person because she has lived a lot of years and she has a lot we can learn from. And, so that too is part of the sin of patriarchy. They really only have use for the mother and the sex kitten, and that has to change. Do we throw away the fat, balding old men? No.
Well,
but
you're right in regards to we with men. You see, men particularly. I'll just refer to actors because you see them, and they can get old, and they can get old gracefully, and they will still appear in their films. But the elderly women, you just do not see.
Yeah, unless you're Helen Mirren, you got a problem.
We've only got one queen.
but you see, that's another thing that would change. We're talking about changing our values, and one of the other values I didn't think to say about till now is we don't value ourselves by what's in our pocketbook, by how many houses we have, or if we even have a house. We value ourselves by or how we are in service to one another and to the community. Imagine if that's the way we were taught, instead of this consumerism that we have, this greed that we have, this predator capitalism that we have. Greed used to be one of the 7 deadly sins. And now suddenly greed is something to aspire to. Well, I think maybe the depression that the whole planet has been in, or shall I say the depression that the 99% around the planet has been in, is making more and more people wake up to the income disparity, to the injustice. So I think there is a silver lining in this cloud of the depression so many people across the globe are feeling, because it's making them look. It's not right that 80 people on the planet hold most of the wealth. Things have got to change, but it also means that we've got to get up off our sofa and not just spend all our time on Facebook, and we've got to get out there and do something.
Now, this, as you say, this isn't about liking a picture on Facebook about the sacred feminine. How do we go about changing things as women? How do we stage the coup? I think is how you were talking about it in the book, staging the coup. How do we?
Well, I think first we have to educate women. They have to be armed with this knowledge. And, and that can be done in lots of ways. What you're doing with your radio show and I'm doing with my radio show, you can do book clubs, you can do movie nights at your house and show important documentaries and pop a bottle of wine afterwards and talk about it. I think we have to find a cause, whatever it is, because there are enough causes out there that need us, whether it's animal rights, women's rights, peace, voting rights. I mean, there's so many things that are under attack today. GMOs, the oil companies, the banks. There's so many different organizations out there that are trying to make a difference, that need volunteers, that maybe need some discretionary income. Don't go to Starbucks every day. Give some of that money that you might go to Starbucks, to a worthy cause. So I think we all have to get active. We have to know what's going on in the news. We have to know who the quote enemy is. We can't, I know, speaking for people here in the United States, they have to stop voting against their economic interests. We have to encourage people to put sexism and racism aside. I know here in the United States, that's what drives the Southern vote, is sexism and racism. They keep voting for Republicans. I hate to say it, but they're very extreme now. So many of them are racist. So many of them are sexist. And they vote their social issues rather than their economic interests. And they're some of the poorest states in the United States, So we have to educate ourselves. We have to get out there and do things. If you're somebody that can run for local office, do it. Make sure you know who you're voting for. Just get on the internet. There's so many things. Educate women about the red tent movement that helps women, get and have a better relationship with their bodies and their menses. Listen to a lot of the archives in my radio show, and I'm sure yours as well, and hear all the different subjects that sort of that you can educate yourself on, that sort of fall under this big umbrella of sacred feminine ideals. Fight for partnership in your own life. And whether I'm talking about balancing the masculine and feminine qualities within yourself, or whether I'm talking about fighting for partnership with other people, try to, women should really start supporting each other and not competing with one another. I think that would be an incredible forward step. If you're a small business owner, try to find ways to partner with other companies. Don't compete, with other companies, because this partnership idea, I think we have to internalize it and externalize it. Whether we're talking about partnership within ourselves or with the people we know, or, businesses in our communities, or whether we're talking corporations with workers. It used to be corporations made CEOs of corporations made 50 times more than their workers. Well, now they're making 350 times more than their workers. And their workers have to work harder for less. We have to restore partnership between the business owner and the workers, so that there's more of a balance there. We have to have partnership between countries. If we could just adopt the idea of partnership instead of competition, so that we had win-win situations instead of winners and losers, that would change so much too.
Wow. What can I say? I believe that you're not just talking grassroots, you're talking all the way through into our political systems, because I believe our political systems have got to change so that they are more female friendly.
Yes, and it's got to change, because you can't have the rich making decisions for the poor. You know, everybody's got to have a seat at the table. You know, it can't be, 80 people on the planet are benefiting from everything and the rest of us are just barely making it. You know, where's the partnership in that? Where's the morality in that? Where's the justice and the equality in that? You know, we accept so much as normal. You know, we accept so much exploitation and domination and oppression as just normal. And you know what? We have to wake up. The sheep will have to wake up. So, I feel like it's my mission to go out there and shake people and say, you know what, it doesn't have to be this way. It wasn't always this way. And you know what, if you don't believe it used to be different, we have a right to try to change it so that we all have a better quality of life.
I truly agree with you. Karen, this has been an absolutely fantastic interview with you for my show. I really, really appreciate it. How do people find out where to find your radio show? How do they connect with you? How do they get hold of your books?
Well, thank you for asking. The easiest place to find me is to go to my website, which is my name, Karen Tate, KarenTate.com. And from that website, you can find my books, and Goddess Calling is the newest book out. Please go to Amazon, go to your local bookseller, order it from me. And just a plug for your local bookseller, they need your business more than Amazon needs your business. Goddess Calling, please buy it. If I get lots of sales, my publisher will publish the next book. So go to my website, find out about my radio show, which is Voices of the Sacred Feminine. It's on every Wednesday night. I have been there for 8 years, so you can find lots and lots of wonderful men and women who are talking about sex, power, religion, politics, all of this stuff that we need to be talking about, that we need to be teaching ourselves so that we can change the world. Because you know what? We're going to do it. I believe it.
Oh, absolutely brilliant. Today I've been speaking to Karen Tate, author of Goddess Calling. It truly was an inspirational book that I read. And thank you very, very much for coming on, Karen.
Oh, you know what? Thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. I really do. And thank you for doing what you're doing as well.